I never expected her to remember my name, let alone everything else. I'd known her for years, technically. She was my best friend Hassan's mom. The kind of woman who opened the door with a polite smile and asked if we wanted tea, even when we were loud and 17 and left crumbs everywhere. Back then, she called me Beta, like I was temporary, like I'd grow out of being there. Now I was 24, back in Karachi after a job that didn't last as long as I told people it would. Hassan had moved to Lahore for work. His old house felt quieter, smaller. I started stopping by in the evenings under the excuse of returning something. A book, a charger, once an old cricket bat that had been in my car for 3 years. The first time I really noticed her, she was standing at the kitchen counter, sunlight coming through the small window above the sink. She was wearing a loose cotton kurta, sleeves pushed up slightly. Not dressed for anyone, just existing. "You still take your tea without sugar, right?" she asked without turning. I blinked. Yeah. She nodded like she'd confirmed something important. It was such a small thing, remembering how I took my tea. But no one had remembered anything about me in a while. Not my order, not my schedule, not even my birthday, without Facebook reminding them. I watched her hands as she poured the tea. Steady, unhurried. There was a faint burn mark near her wrist I'd never noticed before. I caught myself staring and quickly looked away, pretending to check my phone. There were no new messages. I typed one earlier that afternoon. "You free tonight?" It was still sitting in my chat with someone I wasn't brave enough to delete. I never pressed send. I never did. We sat at the small dining table. The clock on the wall ticked louder than I remembered. Or maybe it was just that the house didn't have Hassan's music filling it anymore. "So," she said gently, "what happened with the job?" I shrugged, folding the corner of my napkin over and over until it formed a sharp crease. "It just didn't work out." "That's not the same as failing," she said. I looked up at her then. Really looked. There was no pity in her face. Just something else. Something steadier. "You don't have to explain everything," she added, softer now. That's what did it. The way she didn't push. Didn't try to fix it. Everyone else had advice. She had space. I started coming by more often. Sometimes I'd bring groceries she didn't ask for. Sometimes I'd just text, "Home," and she'd reply with a simple yes. We didn't talk about anything dangerous. Just ordinary things. Her garden that refused to grow tomatoes. My interviews that led nowhere. The neighbor's dog that barked at nothing every night at 11. But there were moments. Once when she laughed at something I said, really laughed, her hand touched my arm for half a second too long. Or maybe it wasn't too long. Maybe I just noticed it too much. Another time, I caught her watching me while I washed the cups. Not in a motherly way. Something quieter. Evaluating. "You've grown up," she said, almost to herself. I didn't know what to do with that. At night, I'd lie in my apartment staring at the ceiling fan, replaying the way she said my name. Not Beta anymore. Just my name. Slower. I told myself it was harmless. She was lonely too. Her husband worked in another city most of the month. The house echoed. Still, there was something shifting. Not loud. Not reckless. Just leaning. Last Thursday, as I was leaving, she walked me to the gate like she always did. The street light flickered above us. It smelled faintly of rain, even though the sky was clear. "Take care," she said. "You too." I hesitated, hands still on the gate latch. She didn't move back inside. My phone buzzed in my pocket before I could say anything else. It was a message from her. I frowned. She was standing right in front of me. I pulled my phone out. "I think we need to talk," it read. And when I looked up, she was already watching my face like she knew exactly what that text had just done to me. When I looked up from the message, she didn't pretend it hadn't happened. "Come inside," she said, almost casually. "It's getting late." It wasn't. It was barely 8. The streetlight just made everything feel later than it was. We sat in the living room, this time, instead of the kitchen. The television was off. The house felt like it was holding its breath. She tucked one leg beneath her on the sofa, the way she used to when Hassan and I were teenagers arguing over football scores. Except now, there was no noise to hide behind. "I shouldn't have texted you like that," she said. "It was impulsive." "It's okay," I replied too quickly. She smiled faintly. "You always say that, even when it's not." I looked at the center table instead of her face. There was a thin crack in the wood I'd never noticed before. I traced it with my eyes like it was something I could follow to an answer. She exhaled slowly. You've been coming here a lot. I nodded. If it's too much, I can. That's not what I mean. Silence stretched between us. Not uncomfortable. Just full. She leaned back. Do you remember when you boys were in 12th grade and you failed that math test? I laughed under my breath. Unfortunately, you didn't tell anyone. You came here that afternoon and helped me fix the broken shelf in the pantry. You were quiet the whole time. I didn't remember that part. You thought I didn't notice, she continued. But I did. I swallowed. You never said anything. You didn't want me to. That settled somewhere deep in my chest. She folded her hands in her lap, then unfolded them. You do the same thing now. It felt strange being read like that. Not judged. Just understood. My husband calls once every few days, she said after a moment. Her voice was steady, but her fingers were worrying at the edge of her dupatta. We talk about bills, groceries, whether the plumber came. That's it. I didn't know what to say to that. I didn't expect to feel. She stopped herself, eyes flicking toward the window. Feel what? I asked softer than I meant to. She met my gaze then. Less alone when you're here. The word alone hung between us like something fragile. I felt heat rise to my face. I don't come here to I know why you come, she said gently. You don't like going back to that empty apartment. She wasn't wrong. My place still smelled like fresh paint and nothing else. No amenities, no noise, just a mattress and a desk and a sink that dripped at night. And I don't mind, she added quickly. I have to be careful. There it was, the thing we hadn't named. You're Essan's friend, she said quietly. I've known you since you were a boy. I'm not a boy anymore. The words slipped out before I could soften them. Her eyes lingered on my face a second longer than usual. Not dismissing, not agreeing, just measuring. I know, she said. That felt more dangerous than if she'd argued. We didn't talk about it after that. Instead, I helped her move a heavy flower pot from the balcony back inside because the wind was picking up. Our hands brushed as we adjusted it. Not accidental, not fully intentional either. When we were done, she didn't pull away immediately. Her fingers stayed lightly against mine, warm, steady. Thank you, she said. It was such an ordinary phrase. But the way she looked at me when she said it, like I had done more than lift a pot, made my chest tighten. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. After that night, something shifted. Not loudly, just enough that I noticed the way she stood a little farther from me in the kitchen. The way she wiped her hands on a towel before handing me a cup, as if contact had to be filtered now. I told myself I was imagining it. Still, when I texted home. The next evening, she replied an hour later instead of 5 minutes. Yes, busy. That was new. I didn't go. The day after, Essan called. You've been going over a lot. Huh, he said casual. Too casual. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling of my apartment. Yeah, just checking in on her. Good, he replied. She gets quiet when I'm not around. Something tightened in my chest. Yeah. He laughed about something else, word drama in Lahore, a colleague who microwaved fish in the office. I responded at the right places. But the whole time, I kept seeing her hand resting over mine on the balcony. When I hung up, I didn't text her. She texted me first. Can you come by? The fuse box is acting up again. I went. The house felt different. Not colder, just aware. She was wearing a darker kurta than usual, hair tied back loosely. There were faint shadows under her eyes. Up there, she said, pointing toward the hallway. I fixed the fuse in less than 5 minutes. It wasn't really broken, just tripped. When I came back to the living room, she was standing by the window, arms folded, watching the street. It wasn't serious, I said. I know. That made me pause. You knew. She nodded, still not looking at me. I just needed an excuse. The words landed softly. Too softly. I stepped closer without meaning to. An excuse for what? She turned then, and the distance between us felt smaller than the room allowed. This, she said quietly, gesturing between us. Whatever this is. I opened my mouth and closed it, because I didn't know what it was. I only knew how it felt when she said my name slower than necessary. You're 24, she said. You have your whole life ahead of you. And you don't. I asked. That's not what I mean. Her voice wavered for the first time. Footsteps sounded outside the front gate. We both froze. The neighbor's voice drifted in, greeting someone on the street. Too close. Too normal. She stepped back instinctively. I noticed. Of course I noticed. This can't look like something, she murmured. It doesn't have to look like anything. She gave me a small, sad smile. That's not how people work. Silence again. Heavy now. I reached for the back of a chair just to ground myself. She noticed that too. I don't want to hurt you, she said. Or him. Ehsan. The name wasn't spoken, but it filled the room. You think this is a phase, I said quieter than I intended. You think I'm confused. I think you're lonely. The honesty stung because it wasn't entirely wrong. And you're not. I asked. Her jaw tightened slightly. A crack in composure. We were close now. Close enough that I could see the faint line near her left eye when she frowned. Close enough to feel the warmth from her skin. She lifted her hand, maybe to push me back, maybe to steady herself. It hovered near my chest. Not touching. Not yet. I don't know what you want from me, she whispered. I almost said it. Almost told her that I didn't want anything complicated. Just this. Just her looking at me like I mattered. Instead, I stepped closer. Too close. Her breath caught. Mine did too. For a second. Just one. Her eyes dropped to my mouth. And she didn't move away. She stepped back first. Not dramatically. Just enough to reintroduce air between us. I can't, she said, almost to herself. Then, steadier, you should go. I didn't argue. That was the strange part. I just nodded, like we had agreed on something practical. I left the house with my hands in my pockets, so she wouldn't see them shake. After that, I stopped going. No more home texts. No more made-up excuses about groceries or fuses. I told myself it was dignity, or maturity, or mercy. She didn't text either. A week passed. Then 10 days. Ehsan sent a meme in the group chat. I responded with a laughing emoji. Normal. Everything normal. I started staying later at cafes, even when I wasn't drinking anything. Letting my coffee go cold. Watching other people pack up and leave in pairs. I take my phone out, open her chat, scroll up to the message that still sat there. I think we need to talk. I never deleted it. On the 12th day, I ran into her at the small park near her house. I almost turned around when I saw her sitting on a bench under the neem tree, but she had already noticed me. There was a brief flicker in her eyes. Surprise. Then something else. You disappeared, she said as I approached. I stayed standing. You told me to go. That night, she corrected quietly. Wind moved through the trees above us. Dry leaves scraped along the pavement. I sat at the far end of the bench. Not close enough to touch. Not far enough to pretend we were strangers. You've been avoiding the house, she said. You've been avoiding me. She inhaled sharply, like she wanted to deny it, but couldn't. Ehsan asked why you haven't visited, she added. That landed heavier than it should have. And what did you say? That you're busy. A pause. Are you? I let out a small breath. Not in the way that matters. She folded her hands in her lap, the way she does when she's choosing her words carefully. There's a woman, she said suddenly. My head snapped toward her. What? At the bakery near the corner. I saw you talking to her last week. I blinked. She was asking if I was in line. She nodded, but her jaw tightened. The realization hit slowly. Were you jealous? Her eyes flicked toward mine, then away. I don't have the right to be. That was the breaking point. Not loud, not explosive, just the quiet admission of something she'd been holding down with both hands. You don't get to decide what you have the right to feel, I said. That's exactly what I have to decide, she replied, more firmly now. Because if I don't, this becomes something I can't take back. There was again that edge. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. What is this to you? She didn't answer immediately. A child ran past us chasing a ball. Somewhere the dog barked. Finally, she said, it feels like standing too close to the edge of a roof. You don't mean to fall, but you stop looking down. My chest tightened. And if I said I'm not afraid of falling? I asked. She turned to face me fully now. No distance left on the bench. That's what scares me, she whispered. Her hand shifted slightly, resting between us. Not touching. Waiting. If we cross this line, she said carefully, what do you think happens after? The question stayed there between us. And for the first time, I didn't have an answer. 2 days after the park, she asked me to come over. Not with home. Just, if you're free, stop by. I need to tell you something. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. Okay. The house smelled faintly of something sweet when I walked in. She must have been baking. The dining table was cleared, wiped too clean, like she'd prepared for a conversation instead of a guest. She didn't offer tea this time. We sat across from each other. I spoke to Hassan, she began. My stomach dropped. Not about you. About us. In a way. I went still. He thinks his father might move back permanently, she said. The transfer might not happen. Her husband, the man who existed mostly as a voice on speakerphone and an occasional overnight suitcase. Oh, I managed. She nodded. You want to try again. Properly this time. I didn't know what properly meant. I didn't ask. I never told you this, she continued, fingers interlacing tightly. But we've been separated in everything but name. For almost a year. That explained things. The distance. The quiet house. The way she sat alone like it was a room she'd memorized. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. She gave a small, tired smile. Because I didn't want to make you part of something unfinished. Something unfinished. And now, I said, now he wants to come back. And I don't know if I owe that effort one last chance. The words felt like they were rearranging the air in the room. I had imagined obstacles. Neighbors. Hassan. Age. Guilt. I hadn't imagined hope being redirected. So what am I? I asked before I could stop myself. Her eyes softened in a way that made it worse. She paused. You're the first person who made me feel awake in a long time. That should have been enough. It wasn't. But I pressed. But I don't know if you're my future or just a reminder that I still have one. That hit somewhere I wasn't prepared for. I stood up, not angrily, just because sitting felt unbearable. So, I'm a reminder, I said quietly. That's not fair. Neither is this. Silence again. Thicker now. Not tender like before. I need time, she said. I nodded, because what else was there to do? As I reached the door, she spoke again. You deserve someone who doesn't hesitate. I didn't turn around. You didn't hesitate at the park. That was before I had to choose. Outside, the air felt heavier than it should have. I walked past the gate without looking back. That night, I typed a message. If he comes back, I won't. I stared at it for 10 full minutes. Read it again. Imagine her reading it. Imagine her not replying. Then I deleted it. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. He came back on a Sunday. I didn't see him. I just saw the extra pair of shoes near the door when I walked past the house that evening. I hadn't planned to stop. My feet did it anyway. The lights were on in the kitchen. I could see her silhouette moving behind a curtain. Slower than usual. Measured. I stood outside the gate for a full minute before ringing the bell. It was him who opened the door. Older than I remembered. Thinner. Polite. Yes. I was just returning something, I said, even though my hands were empty. He stepped aside. Kumain. The house felt different with him inside. Not louder. Just occupied. She appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. When she saw me, something flickered across her face. Not shock. Not guilt. Something steadier. You didn't tell me you were coming, she said. I didn't know I was. Her husband glanced between us, then back toward the hallway. I'll take this call outside, he muttered, already stepping away. We were alone in the kitchen. The same small space where she used to remember my tea. You shouldn't have come, she said quietly. I know, but I didn't leave. There was a pot simmering on the stove. The smell of cumin and onions. Domestic. Grounded. Real. Is he staying? I asked. For now. And you? She looked at the counter instead of me. I said I would try. The word try again. I nodded slowly. I had imagined this moment being sharper. Angrier. It wasn't. It just felt final. I need to say something, I said before I could talk myself out of it. Her shoulders tensed slightly. I didn't come here because I was lonely, I continued. Or confused. Or bored. She didn't interrupt. I came because when you looked at me, I felt chosen. And I didn't realize how much I needed that until it happened. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the counter. I'm not asking you to leave him, I added quickly. I'm not asking for anything. That was the truth. It hurt, but it was the truth. I just didn't want you thinking this was a phase. It wasn't. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything we weren't going to do. She walked toward me slowly, not close enough to blur the line, just close enough to make the air heavier. I know, she said. Her voice broke slightly on the second word. I didn't feel young with you, she continued. I felt seen, and that scared me more than the age difference. More than Hassan, more than the neighbors. A breath. But if I don't try to fix what I built, I'll always wonder if I ran because it was easier. I nodded. It made sense. That was the worst part. You're not running, I said. She looked at me like she wanted to believe that. Footsteps approached from the hallway. We both heard them. She reached out then, quick, almost instinctive, and adjusted the collar of my shirt. A small, ordinary gesture. Her fingers lingered for half a second longer than necessary. Okay, she whispered. It wasn't a question about us. It was a question about whether I would let this be what it was. I swallowed. Okay. Her hand dropped. He stayed 3 months. Long enough for the neighborhood to adjust to the sight of his car outside again. Long enough for the routine to look repaired from the outside. I kept my distance. Different cafe. Different route home. I stopped walking past her street at 8:47 a.m. The time I somehow always ended up there without planning to. Hassan called once to say, "It's good, you know, having him back." I said, "Yeah, good." And I meant it in the way people mean things when they're trying to. Then one Thursday evening, my phone buzzed. Not home. Just, "Are you near the park?" I stared at it for a long time. "I can be," I replied. She was already sitting on the same bench under the neem tree when I arrived. The air had shifted, the edge of summer fading into something softer. She looked different. Not younger, not older, just clearer. "He left," she said before I could sit down. I didn't react right away. "For work." She shook her head. "We tried," she added. "We were polite. Careful. We talked about things we should have talked about years ago." A small, tired smile. It turns out effort doesn't always mean repair. "You sat beside her." Not at the far end this time. "Is this because of me?" I asked. "No," she said firmly. "It's because I finally stopped pretending I wasn't lonely inside my own life." That felt heavier than any confession. We sat in silence for a while. A familiar kind now. Not tense. Not charged. Just shared. "I kept thinking about what you said," she continued. "About not being a phase." I swallowed. "You weren't." The wind moved through the leaves above us, softer than the last time we were here. "I don't want to choose you because I'm afraid of being alone," she said. "And I don't want you choosing me because I made you feel seen once." "That's fair," I replied. She turned to me fully. "I want to choose you because when I picture an ordinary Tuesday, tea in the kitchen, the clock ticking too loud, someone asking how the interview went, I see you there." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't poetic. It was better. "I still drink my tea without sugar," I said because I didn't trust my voice with anything bigger. She laughed quietly. I know. This time, when our hands rested on the bench between us, neither of us hesitated. Months later, the routine felt different again. Black coffee in my apartment that no longer smelled like fresh paint. Her plants finally growing tomatoes on the balcony. Me fixing small things without being asked. At 8:47 a.m., sometimes she'd text, "Already outside." And I'd reply, "You're predictable." She'd say, "So are you." We never talked about the line we almost crossed that night in the living room. We didn't need to. Some evenings when the clock ticks a little too loud and the tea goes slightly cold because we're talking about nothing important, she'll glance at me the same way she did that first day in the kitchen. Not measuring, just sure. And every time without saying it out loud, I think, you can't take back what's been done. But sometimes, if you're careful, you can choose what happens after. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next? And that was it.